At Christmas dinner, my grandfather slid 3 crisp white envelopes across the table and said softly, "A small Christmas surprise for each of you." The silverware froze midair. My parents laughed. That overdone, hollow kind of laughter people use when they're uncomfortable. Because guilt doesn't laugh, it performs. "It's just one of his little games," my mom said, rolling her eyes. Dad joined in, chuckling like mocking him was a family tradition. I didn't laugh. I simply smiled, tucked my envelope into my coat pocket, and stayed quiet. They thought it was just another one of Grandpa's eccentric gestures. But the next morning, when the phone rang and the banker said, "Your deposit has cleared, Miss Hale," I realized he hadn't been joking at all. Before I tell you how that single phone call shattered my family, tell me where you're listening from. So I know I'm not the only one who's seen love turn fake over something that was never really about money. My name is Amelia Hale, and that night wasn't the first time I'd watched my family laugh at something that actually mattered. My parents, Victor and Elaine, built their lives around appearances. Charity brunches, perfect photos beside their new cars, captions that read, "We've worked so hard for this life." What they never mentioned was that most of it began with my grandfather, Edmund Hale, the man they pretended to adore but quietly resented. Grandpa wasn't just wealthy, he was respected. His money wasn't loud. It was earned, built through patience, investments, and land. The kind of wealth that didn't crave attention. He'd created everything from nothing and still wore the same leather watch he'd owned for 40 years. He believed in effort, humility, and the strength of silence. Maybe that's why he had more patience for me than for them. I didn't ask. I worked. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment in Portland and freelanced as an interior designer. No staff, no assistant. Just me, my laptop, and long hours. My parents saw that as failure. They called it staying humble in public. But behind closed doors, they said, "You're wasting your potential. You could be running a firm by now if you just network." And by network, they meant marry rich. Or charm clients like they did through connections, not capability. When Grandpa invited us for Christmas dinner that year, I went because I missed him. They went because they smelled money. I could see it. In the way Mom checked her lipstick in the car mirror, and the way Dad rehearsed his laugh before we even pulled into the driveway. Everything with them felt like a performance. The dining room carried the scent of pine and roasted duck. The table gleamed with crystal glasses and gold-rimmed plates. Grandpa sat at the head, posture straight, gaze sharper than it appeared. We made small talk about the weather and work until he reached into his jacket and pulled out 3 identical envelopes. "A little Christmas gift," he said softly. Mom gave a short, rehearsed laugh. "Oh, Dad, are we doing your pretend checks again? How adorable." Dad chuckled too. "You always know how to make the holidays entertaining." I wanted to disappear under the table. Grandpa didn't react. He simply looked at them, slowly, quietly, before turning his eyes toward me. I felt my face warm. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't need to. "Thank you," I said, and slipped it carefully into my coat pocket. No one noticed the small fade in his smile after that. The conversation continued. Laughter, bragging, the usual noise. But I saw how his hand lingered near his glass, how his blinks came slower than before. He'd known this would happen. Later that evening, as we said goodbye, he hugged me a moment longer than usual and whispered, "Keep it safe." I nodded, not understanding what he meant. The drive home was quiet except for the wipers scraping across the windshield. Mom broke the silence first. "You actually kept that thing," she said, twisting in her seat to face me. "You know he does this every year. It's just part of his little show." Dad was already half distracted by his phone. "He's testing who still bows to him, that's all. He likes feeling in control." I kept my eyes on the snow outside. "Or maybe," I said softly, "he just wants to see who still respects him." Mom sighed. That dramatic sigh she uses when she thinks I'm being foolish. "Sweetheart, you really need to stop taking everything so seriously." That night, my apartment felt colder than usual. The radiator buzzed faintly, and the smell of roasted duck still clung to my coat. I hung it over the back of a chair, pulled out the envelope, and turned it over in my hands. Grandpa's handwriting. Steady. Sure, unmistakable. I hadn't opened it at dinner because it didn't feel right. The way he handed it to me had felt solemn, not like a joke. So I sat on my bed, carefully tore open the flap, and slid out a real check. 5 zeros. The ink was crisp, the signature clear and deliberate. For a long moment, I just stared. Then I tucked it back inside, folded the flap closed, and placed it in the small wooden box where I keep things that matter. Old letters, receipts from my first design job, a photo of Grandpa and me sanding a table in his workshop when I was 12. I didn't plan to cash it. I didn't plan anything. I just couldn't treat it like another one of their jokes. The next morning, my phone buzzed me awake. A message from Zoe. Friend, co-worker, morning energy in human form. How was the glamorous family dinner? She wrote. I replied, predictable. They laughed. I didn't. A minute later, her voice memo came through. Half teasing, half sincere. Girl, you're the only one in that family with any class. Just keep surviving. I smiled, sipping my coffee, but a thought tugged at the edge of my mind. Grandpa's final words echoed back. Keep it safe. I decided to deposit the check. Not out of greed, more out of curiosity. Maybe he wanted me to uncover something. Or maybe it was just symbolic. I scanned it through the banking app and went about my morning, not expecting anything at all. Hours later, I was sketching a client's living room layout when my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello. A calm, professional voice replied, Good afternoon, Miss Hale. I'm calling from your bank. Your deposit has cleared. I froze. Cleared? I opened the app. The amount matched exactly. My pulse stuttered. If mine went through, what about theirs? Before I could think it through, my phone lit up again. Mom's name flashing across the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was sharp and trembling, the kind she used when she was furious but pretending not to be. Did you talk to your grandfather today? No, I said slowly. Why? Because something's wrong with the checks, she snapped. The bank said ours were stopped. She paused, lowering her voice as if confessing a crime. They said yours went through. I didn't respond. The silence only made her angrier. Did you? Did you call him? Did you say something? No, Mom. I just deposited it. Well, he's clearly playing favorites again, she burst out. He's punishing us. For being successful, for moving on. I wanted to tell her no. He's punishing you for laughing at him. But I didn't. I just listened to her breathing. Fast, uneven, desperate to reshape the story before anyone else could. Later that afternoon, Dad called. His tone was cooler, detached. Your mother's upset. You could have told us you deposited it. It was a gift, I said quietly. That's what you do with gifts. Don't get clever with me, Amelia. He's old. He doesn't know what he's doing anymore. Old. That word hit harder than she realized. That night, Grandpa called. His voice was calm, steady. Nothing like theirs. Did the bank reach out to you, sweetheart? Yes, I said. They said it cleared. Good. He paused. I could hear the faint crackle of his fireplace in the background. Don't worry about your parents, he said quietly. Some lessons take longer to learn. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't have to. The next morning, our family group chat erupted. Mom's messages overflowing with blame and confusion. Dad threatening to fix this immediately. But Grandpa stayed silent. 2 days later, an envelope arrived in the mail. His handwriting again. Neat, unmistakable. Dinner. Same house. Saturday, 7 p.m. No note. No explanation. Just a time and a place. Zoe called when she found out. You think he's going to confront them? I stared at the clean black ink on the card. I think he already has. Saturday came, and I stood once again in front of Grandpa's house. Snow crunching beneath my boots, my heartbeat steady. But this time, I wasn't the timid one waiting to be included. This time, I was the only one who'd passed the test. The house looked exactly as it had the week before. Warm light glowing through the windows, wreaths hanging on every door, the faint hum of a fire inside. Yet something in the air had shifted. Tighter, heavier. I could feel it before I even knocked. Inside, the dining table was set just as before. 3-place settings, gold-rimmed plates, a silver tray gleaming like a mirror. But the silence between us was thick. Mom sat rigidly, arms folded, her smile brittle and forced. Dad scrolled through his phone, but his eyes kept flicking toward the hallway, waiting. Then came the sound of slow, measured footsteps. Both their heads turned. Grandpa entered, calm, deliberate, holding a thin stack of papers. He didn't greet us. He didn't look angry, only certain. "I won't keep you long," he said, laying the papers on the table. "Each of you will find your names there. Bank statements printed this morning." Mom blinked rapidly. "Dad, this isn't funny. You embarrassed us. The teller said you canceled our checks." He nodded once. "I did." Silence. "Why?" Dad demanded. "If this was some kind of test, it's cruel." Grandpa looked at me, then turned back to them. "Cruel," he said evenly, "would be letting you go on believing that respect is optional." Mom's voice trembled. "We didn't mean anything by it. It was just a joke." "A joke," he interrupted. "When you laughed at the gift I offered, you laughed at me, at the years that made it possible." She swallowed, speechless. "We thought," she began. "Exactly," he said flatly. "You thought." He turned his eyes toward me. She fell. The room fell into silence. The only sound was the faint crackle from the fireplace in the corner. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Dad leaned back in his chair, frustration tightening his jaw. "This isn't right. You know we've helped you too. You're blowing this out of proportion." Grandpa's brow lifted. "Help me? You've taken my money and called it independence. You've built an image, not a life." Mom burst into tears. Not the kind that come from sadness, but from fear. "You can't just cut us off like this." He reclined slightly, calm and certain. "I already have." Dad's face reddened. "You'll regret this." Grandpa's tone softened, but the weight in his words remained. "No, son. What I regret is raising a man who values appearances more than truth." Then he turned toward me. "Amelia." My chest tightened. "Yes, Grandpa." He slid one of the folders across the table. "This belongs to you. I've transferred full authority over the trust and properties into your name. Daniel will walk you through the details." Mom's head jerked up. "What?" He didn't blink. "You both still have your homes, your careers, your lives. What you've lost is my faith that you understand what family truly means." Dad stood abruptly, gripping the back of his chair until his knuckles went white. "You're rewarding her for doing nothing." Grandpa's voice rose for the first time. Sharp, powerful, unshakable. "She did everything. She listened. She respected. She didn't mock." The echo of his words filled the space like thunder. No one moved. No one breathed. And then, quietly, he delivered the line that ended it all. "Now I know who's real." It hit like a final judgment. Absolute, beyond argument. Mom slumped forward, defeated. Dad's anger collapsed into something smaller. Guilt, maybe. I sat frozen, my heart pounding, a mix of sorrow and clarity washing over me. After what felt like forever, Grandpa stood. "Dinner's in the oven. You're welcome to stay and eat. If you can still sit at this table with honesty." He walked out. Mom gathered her purse in silence. Dad muttered something about manipulation and stormed toward the door. It slammed behind him. The house fell still again, the only sound the ticking of the grandfather clock. I looked around. At the untouched plates, the faint glimmer of light off the silver, and just sat there. It felt almost unreal. A few minutes later, Grandpa returned, carrying 2 steaming bowls of soup. He placed one in front of me and took his usual seat across the table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the faint clinking of spoons and the wind whispering outside. Then he finally broke the silence. "You didn't cash it for the money, did you?" I shook my head. "No, I just didn't want to disrespect you." He nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That's what I figured. You see, Amelia, money doesn't impress me. Manners do." He leaned back slightly, eyes reflecting the flicker of the fire. "People reveal who they really are when they start thinking they're too good for gratitude." I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. "You didn't have to go this far just to make a point." "I didn't do it to make a point," he replied quietly. "I did it to protect what little decency this family still has." We finished eating in a shared, wordless understanding. Before I left, he handed me another envelope, this one unsealed. Inside was a single note written in his neat, old-fashioned handwriting. Money changes hands every day. Respect only once. I slipped it into my coat pocket. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, drifting down in soft, slow spirals. As I stepped off his porch, I glanced back through the window. He was still at the table, the firelight glinting off his glasses, calm and content, like a man who had finally done what needed to be done. I drove home without turning on the radio. The world outside was hushed, and for the first time in years, so was I. A week later, I sat across from Daniel Kerr, Grandpa's lawyer, in a quiet downtown office that smelled faintly of cedar polish and paper. He explained the trust transfer carefully, sliding the documents toward me. I barely glanced at the figures. They didn't matter. Mr. Hale wanted me to make sure you understand, Daniel said gently. This isn't a reward. It's a responsibility. I nodded. He'd already taught me that lesson. Outside the frosted window, the city carried on as if nothing had shifted, even though everything had. My parents hadn't called since that night. Mom had sent one short message, "Hope you're happy." I never replied. There wasn't anything left to say. When I went to see Grandpa again, he was in his study, reading beside the fire. The light glinted off the rims of his glasses as he looked up. "I hope they're okay," I murmured. "They will be," he said gently. "Sometimes the truth has to hurt before it can heal." We didn't speak about the money. Instead, we talked about my work, my next project, and his plans for the garden in spring. It felt like breathing again. Before I left, he said one more thing. Quietly, almost to himself. "A check is just paper, Amelia, until you decide what it's worth." I drove home through the dimming light, his words replaying over and over in my mind. The snow had melted from the streets, yet something inside me had finally settled. Steady, calm, like respect finding its proper place. They had thought the check was fake. But the only thing false that night was their love. I hadn't won anything. I'd simply stopped losing myself chasing their approval. Now, whenever I pass the bank on my way to work, I remember that night. The call, the silence, the truth that finally landed. Some lessons don't come in shiny packages. They arrive disguised as heartbreak. And they stay with you far longer than money ever could. If you've ever learned what respect truly costs, share this story. And tell me, what would you have done in my place?